In this work, we present the role of transients in two-bounce non-line-of-sight imaging. Prior works have shown that objects behind occluders can be imaged using its cast shadows. A laser spot illuminates a surface on one side of the object, and a camera measures the shadows on the other side. Using multiple shadow images, it is possible to reconstruct the shape of the hidden object using voxel carving. The first advantage of this setup is that the SNR of shadows is independent of the object's albedo. The second advantage is that 2-bounce light has higher SNR than 3-bounce light, which is commonly used in NLOS. However, all these methods require laser scanning, which results in slow image capture. In this work, rather than scanning one laser spot at a time, we illuminate all 50 laser spots simultaneously and unmix the shadows using a SPAD. Our contributions are twofold. We present a forward model to describe 2-bounce LiDAR in multiplexed illumination. We also present analysis to determine important system parameters. Our key insight is that transients can enable few-shot NLOS. We introduce some notation to describe the forward model. Without loss of generality, assume we illuminate the right wall and image the left wall. If no hidden object is present, what we would measure is referred to as the empty transient. If an object is present, this would be referred to as the light transient. The difference between these two is the shadow transient. In the light transient, we see a hole appear to propagate in spacetime. This hole is the shadow transient. We can derive a forward model with respect to the shadow transients. Now let's dig deeper into this linear forward model. First, we will study the mapping from X to Y, from voxels to transients. Suppose we have a two-wall scene here, and we discretize the hidden scene into a voxel grid. Now suppose exactly one voxel is occupied. When we illuminate the right wall, we would expect some shadow transient measurement on the left wall as follows. Note that from here on out, any measurement we refer to will be assumed to be shadow transients. It turns out that each voxel has its own distinct space-time impulse response, which we can estimate from the scene geometry alone. Now let's study the mapping from Y to X, from transients to voxels. Suppose we have the same two-wall scene with a discretized hidden voxel grid. We illuminate the right wall and observe a given pixel on the left wall. This pixel may observe a shadow transient that looks something like this. In this example, we see a peak around 5 nanoseconds, which means the light would have traveled 1.5 meters. We know the path length the light traveled, but not the path. However, assuming 2-bounce light, by tracing out all possible paths light could have traveled, the path ambiguity lies along an ellipse. Computing the intersection of this ellipse with the right wall yields the possible light paths that could have contributed to the signal at 5 nanoseconds. Note that only a certain set of voxels can be probed at 5 nanoseconds. Also, consider the fact that SPADs have discrete timing resolution, meaning that the ellipse on the wall would actually become an ellipse with some thickness. The key takeaway is that at a given timing bin, only a certain set of voxels can be probed. Now we use our intuitions from the Y to X mapping to do object reconstruction. Suppose we have one voxel occupied, shown here in yellow, and our measured transient at the green pixel is given here on the left. Based on what we did previously, we go through each timing bin one at a time, starting with T1. At T1, we compute the ellipse from the previous slide and denote which voxels have been probed. We project the intensity at T1 along these voxels. Then we repeat the same for T2, where we project the same intensity along the voxels. At T3, we see a spike, so we project this larger intensity along the probed voxels. Recall that the original voxel was the yellow voxel right over here, and what we are getting is actually a smeared version of the original voxel. When we repeat the back projection procedure for all timing bins and all pixels, we would get something that looks like this for different voxels. Note that the back projection of a single point gives the point spread function at that specific voxel. Now let's summarize our intuitions about the A matrix. We have this linear forward model, y equals to ax, where x is the voxel occupancy, y is the shadow transient, and a is the measurement operator, mapping x to y. The forward model x to y tells us that given a space-time impulse response for all timing bins and all pixels, we want to synthesize this measurement using the occupancies at voxel 1 and voxel 2 and so on. And the way we do this is we synthesize the original measurement by combining the space-time impulse response of each and every voxel. Therefore, the column space of our A matrix forms the per voxel space-time impulse response. The adjoint model, on the other hand, from y to x, tells us that we have these voxel occupancies, and we want to determine which of these voxels have been probed at each time. Therefore, the row space of A tells us the projection cone along each timing bin, and the row space tells us which voxels have been probed for each timing bin. We now show the experimental setup and results. For simplicity, we leave the occluder out of the image. The hidden mannequin is flanked on both sides by two walls. On the right wall, we illuminate the laser spots, and on the left wall, we image using the SPAD. Due to limited availability of SPAD array technology, we use a single pixel SPAD to collect our data. We scan the SPAD pixel's field of view using a Thorlabs galvanometer. Similarly, we scan the laser across the right wall and sum the images in post-processing to mimic multiplexing. Though this isn't a true realization of few-shot capture, this type of experimental capture is more conducive to our goal of performing analysis. We compare the result of our method using transients and no transients. We see that if we collect 60 measurements, one for each laser spot, we obtain pretty similar reconstructions in both cases. However, as we start to multiplex more laser spot, the reconstruction worsens drastically without transients. We note that the rightmost case is scanning capture, the middle few cases are few-shot capture, and the leftmost case would constitute a single-shot capture. We now quantify the importance of spatial resolution versus temporal resolution using a metric known as mutual coherence. Mutual coherence measures the similarity between two column vectors. The smaller the mutual coherence, the fewer redundancies in A, and the more recoverable your voxel occupancy, based on compressed sensing theory. To better understand this, consider the two-wall setup. Suppose exactly one voxel is occupied and has the corresponding space-time impulse response. Suppose another voxel has the exact same impulse response. Based on the measurement, it would be impossible to distinguish between the green voxel and the blue voxel. When we plot the mutual coherence as a function of spatio-temporal resolution, we see that the coherence varies more rapidly along the y-axis. This indicates that temporal resolution affects the coherence more. We also experimentally validate this, as can be seen by the aliasing artifacts of the arms and legs in the top row, which has worse temporal resolution. Also note that the mutual coherence is a function of the desired voxel resolution. In conclusion, we have shown how transients can reduce the number of measurements needed for two bounced non-line-of-sight imaging. This would be applicable in many scenarios with two surfaces. For example, consider an autonomous vehicle being able to see in front of the car in front of it by using two bound signals off the side of the tunnel. For more information about the project, please refer to our project page or shoot us an email.